Good afternoon, guys. My name is Alena Shautsova. I'm an immigration attorney from Brooklyn, New York. In today's live updates, I'm going to provide to you some information regarding how various immigration bodies are operating during these times, what deadlines you need to be aware of, what is going to happen with interviews, when all those different agencies are set to reopen. And of course, I'm going to answer some of your questions in the end. So I think the most annoying part about this current situation is that various immigration agencies have different rules as to what's going to happen, have different deadlines when they're set to reopen, and there is no unified system, unified website to look at to see what is it that's exactly going on and how it's going to be resolved. So I find it difficult to follow because we have USCIS where we have our affirmative cases pending. We have asylum offices, which is part of USCIS but separate branch. We have immigration courts with their own rules and deadlines. We have ICE reporting. Let's say somebody has an order of supervision and needs to report according to that order. Those people also have their own deadlines and own rules. So let's start with USCIS and interviews. I received many questions still about what's going to happen with various USCIS scheduled interviews. How are they going to be managed? If they're going to be waived, what's going to happen? So let's start with the most common interview, adjustment of status interview with USCIS. Let's say you had your interview scheduled and it was canceled because of coronavirus. What's going to happen? For adjustment of status interviews, USCIS is going to reschedule that interview for you automatically. You do not need to do anything, okay? When they will start to work again, they will reschedule it. And by the way, currently, according to USCIS website, USCIS is set to restart on or after June 4th, 2020. This date may change, but it means that as early as June 4th, they will currently are set to reopen for in-person business, like emergency info pass appointments, some filings, perhaps bond processing payments, because in some locations, as you may be aware, bond processing payments are not being accepted. So for adjustment of status interviews, unless your interview will be waived, they will reschedule it. When can you hope for the interview to be waived? I would find at least three to four cases, category of cases, when you may hope for your interview to be waived. I have to disappoint you, it's most likely not going to be marriage-based cases. I think it will be employment-based cases, perhaps special immigrant juvenile cases, because I've seen many of them being granted without interviews anymore. VAWA, self-petition cases, very possible. And also I-751 interviews based when you file a petition to remove condition from your case. So I think for those categories, at least, we can hope for the interviews to be waived, and it's done on case-by-case basis. Naturalization interviews. By law, they cannot be waived. You have to appear for the interview, for the test. So those interviews will be automatically rescheduled. Asylum, affirmative asylum interviews, they will be automatically rescheduled. Don't need to do anything. Fingerprint appointments or biometric appointments. For the biometric appointments, you again will receive automatic new notice. Don't need to do anything unless your biometrics already been waived. For example, previously you filed for some immigration benefit, or you have some benefit pending. Let's say you have asylum, affirmative asylum cases pending, and now you filed for adjustment of status. Your biometrics most likely were waived. You will not need to wait for the new notice. InfoPass appointments. If you had an InfoPass appointment that was, or you had to cancel it or was canceled, unfortunately, it will not be automatically rescheduled. You will have to call again and have a new appointment scheduled for you. There is no opportunity anymore to do it online, and for the most cases, there are no walk-ins InfoPass appointments anymore, so they have to be previously scheduled by calling USCIS customer service number. So you will have to do that. That's something to know about. So again, currently USCIS is scheduled to reopen on June 4th. So I would say if they will open on June 4th, expect as early as the next week from that time to have your interview scheduled. Now, the interesting thing about those this time and interviews that came to my head is that I would think that for marriage-based cases, you can expect now during the marriage-based interview questions about the COVID situation. Let's say something like, who did you spend your quarantine with? How did it go? And things like that. So I think that it's something that you need to be aware of and prepare well for those cases. All right, so that's what's going on with USCIS interviews. Now, another important thing that, as you may be aware, USCIS gave 60 days grace period to answer most of its inquiries if the date on the decision on all inquiry was between March 1st through July 1st. It means that, let's say you received the denial notice during March 1st through July 1st, and usually you have 30 days to appeal. According to USCIS, now you're going to have 90 days to appeal. You're going to have extra 60 days, okay? Same goes for request for more evidence, notice of intent to deny, notice of intent to revoke. It's very important to know that, because of course right now it may be hard for you to collect necessary evidence, secure affidavits from people, or even find an attorney to work on the case remotely, right? So that's very important. The bad part is that USCIS will not give automatic extensions for status that expires, non-immigrant status, like tourist visitor status or student H-1Bs. So when you have an expiring status, it's your responsibility, even if you did not plan on staying in the United States, to file for an extension of status, not to accumulate unlawful presence, because that unlawful presence is going to make accumulated automatically. Nobody's going to care that you didn't have opportunity to leave the United States, even though, of course, it should be an excuse, but the law currently does not provide for any excuses. And currently, if your tourist status expires on May 3rd, on May 4th, you are considered to be out of status. You should file for an extension of status. Even if right now your deadline to file for it passed, let's say you believe that because of the COVID situation, you will not be in unlawful presence, you should file for an extension of status as soon as possible, asking to excuse the delay and gap in your status that you have between the time the status expired and the time your application is filed. USCIS actually stated that they will consider your request for excuse and may excuse it. It's very important to do that, not to accumulate unlawful presence, because even one day of unlawful presence may prevent you from coming back to the United States, okay? Now, interesting update about immigration court. Just today we learned that for immigration court, all non-detained hearings nationwide will be postponed through May 29th. Through May 29th. May 29th, 2020. If you had a hearing scheduled, excuse me, on May 28th, it will be postponed. Automatically, you're going to receive a notice, nothing. You don't need to do anything. Just make sure you inform the court and the DHS counsel about change of address, because if you don't and they send a new hearing date, you may be in default. It's very important to know that. Now, with immigration courts, however, it's not everything so straightforward. Why? Because each immigration court nowadays, almost each immigration court nowadays, have what's called a standing order. Standing order is an order as to how that particular court is operating during this time. And it's very important to read that. You can find it on immigration court websites, EOIR.gov website. In that standing order, it's explained what you still need to do for your case. It states, for example, for New York, that filing deadlines remain filing deadlines. And you have to produce documents if the judge ordered you to produce the documents by a certain date. If you have a hearing, for example, scheduled June 1st, and you have a 30-day call-up, you will still have to produce those documents. If, however, your hearing has been, you know by now that your hearing is not going to take place, usually the court will allow you to submit documents within the same call-up time prior to the next hearing date. It means, unfortunately, that you will have to prepare for the case sometimes several times, depending on how many adjournments you have. You'll have to prepare your documents. Let's say you had to prepare now your documents and the case got adjourned, and the new hearing date is most likely to happen only next year or maybe even in 2 years. You will have to refresh all the documents again, because the judges like refreshed documents. If you're going to try to produce documents dated this year, next year, they're going to say that you're lazy and didn't do your job, and they may deny your application for relief. Especially it is true for applicants for cancellation of removal, right? Because we have to update those documents all the time, and it's very important to do that. Bottom line, check standing orders for your immigration court if you have a pending immigration case, to make sure you're not missing any deadlines and you're not filing documents too early. Because in New York, for example, Federal Plaza, there is an order that they prefer you not to submit documents more than 3 months in advance, okay? That's very, very important to know. So that's an important update for the immigration court. Remember, you still have an obligation to inform about your change of address, any changes in your situation, depending on your case. And that's something that you need to be aware of. And finally, we have update regarding ICE or ERO. ICE, reporting to ICE. Many people in the United States have orders of deportation that they received either at the border or later, notices of reinstatement, and they are subject to orders of supervision. Well, first of all, I hope you already know that if you have an order of supervision, you're entitled to receive. You can apply, let's say, not entitled, you can apply for an employment authorization. And many of my clients successfully received it even during these times, right? But most importantly, you still have to report, but by phone. All right, so this is another interesting deadline. In New York, ICE reporting is going to be done by phone through July 1st, 2020. Then they stated they're going to re-evaluate the situation and maybe impose new deadline or will open for business. If you have been in ICE reporting at 26 Federal Plaza on the 9th floor, you know that the place is packed. So it's really not safe to reopen it early. And perhaps that's why ICE reporting has the farthest deadline so far to reopen, set as July 1st. Immigration Court, May 29, USCIS, June 4th, and ICE, July 1st. So 3 different agencies, 3 different deadlines. So I hope this update was helpful. Again, you have some extra time to work on inquiries and appeals and motions to reopen for USCIS. And now I will answer some of the questions. All right. Hi, I would love to ask you advice as I watch your show often and appreciate all the advice you give us. My wife and I had our immigration interview in October of 2019. The interview did not go well as hoped. Well, it happens. Needless to say, we still have not received a response either through mail or USCIS website. We check all the time. My question here, should we be concerned, or could our paperwork just gotten lost? I don't think that your paperwork got lost. And as to concern, I'm not sure which particular interview it was. If it was I-45 interview, sometimes what happens is that USCIS does extra checks regarding the validity of the marriage, and that's why perhaps you were not called for the second interview. But you may, I've seen it in the past that people are going to wait for a long time, sometimes even a year and longer, and going to be called for a second interview, Stokes interview. So depending on what interview it was, what I recommend you to do right now is a good time. Follow up with them, okay? Ask your lawyer to follow up with them, and maybe it will wake them up and see what's going to happen next. But be prepared for the next step, because if they send you that notice for the Stokes interview, you better be prepared. Hi, I'm a US citizen. I apply. My mom and family-based green card interview was set for April 1st, of course, but it was canceled because of Corona. What I need to do next? You do not need to do anything. If they still believe that your mom needs to appear for the interview, they're going to reschedule it automatically. Or perhaps they will waive it. You know, there was a time in the United States when parents didn't have to appear for the interviews when the kids were sponsoring them, especially mothers, right? So you will need to wait and see. There is nothing that you can do at this time, unfortunately. By the way, if you guys have I-45 pending, make sure you extend your employment authorizations, okay? You file for the extensions for the employment authorizations. Hi, I'm in USA Overstayed visa. I married 2017 and I went to interview January 2019. I'm in removing process, but I couldn't get answer from immigration. It was I-130 in New Jersey. I do not know what should I do, how many years I have to wait. All right, if I understood this correctly, you are in removal proceedings and going through adjustment of status. What's going to happen is that first you have to be called for the I-130 interview with USCIS. That's the procedure. And only after that is done and granted, the judge will be deciding your I-45. How long is going to wait? Well, there is a backlog for those interviews as always. So if I had to guess it, but you said that you went for the interview in January 2019, they should have made a decision by now because it's been more than a year. I would try to follow up with them, okay, to see what's going on. To follow up, how do you follow up, right? Well, you send them a letter, an inquiry, your attorney does that. Attorney can also use what's called liaisons with American Immigration Lawyers Associations. It's sometimes effective. There is also USCIS Ombudsman's Office that helps to follow up, and congressmen. Some congressmen, they have very effective immigration division that help people to follow up on their cases. All right, sometimes it's just a matter of waking them up, okay? My wife and I got our removal proceedings terminated on New York court because a U visa approved. How can I get back my ICE bond? Okay. First of all, I don't think you were the person who placed the ICE bond, right? Because it was yours and your wife's. And for the ICE bond questions, you need to contact your the person who placed the bond for you, the bond obligator, the person who took the obligations. And usually you can request a form from ICE about the bond cancellation, and that's how you start the process of getting the money back. If you applied for asylum and your wife joined you 3 years later, can she file a separate application or add her to my case? I think we could have more chances if she filed a separate one based on my persecution. Honestly, will not be able to tell you what is the best course because it depends on the facts of your case, okay? Depends on what's going on and how your wife entered, if she's in status, if she's not, what's going on with you. Are you in court? Are you in USCIS? Affirmative asylum application. But sometimes it's a good idea to file a separate case so then you can be dependent on her application, okay? Depending on what's going on with your case. I suggest that you discuss it with your attorney. It's almost impossible to provide a good answer in this particular format, okay? During the consultation, perhaps when a lawyer reviews your documents, the lawyer will be able to advise you better. Let me see, my wife and I got our removal. Okay, that's the question we had. I have applied for asylum in the end of 2018, but they didn't call me for asylum interview. Can you explain, please? Sometimes they don't, depending on where your case is pending. If you have a receipt that your application is in fact pending, you are okay. All right. There was time when they stopped calling for the interview in Newark and Boston because they got busy with the other cases. So you need to make sure that your case was filed. If it was in fact filed and just pending, you should be all right. I wouldn't worry much about that. In general, there is a huge backlog on asylum cases. All right. And please, is NVC taking applications? Are you referring to DS forms that can be filed online? Yes, and you can still upload the documents, absolutely. You know, be aware of the Trump ban on the interviews, but generally speaking, this will affect only those who already completed the NVC stage and were waiting for the interviews that were scheduled. Hello, I applied for my wife green card renewal, which is based on marriage. I applied last January. I would like to know in how many months I will get the interview letter. Do we have both have to go for the interview? Okay, I will not be able to answer the question as to how long you need to wait for the interview, especially now, because of course, if you apply this January, as you can imagine, the backlog for the processing is going to grow due to the situation when USCIS had to close and scheduled interviews could not go forward. So we have a big backlog. But I can answer the second question. Do we have both? Do we both have to go for the interview? Yes. For the marriage-based cases, even though you're a US citizen, both of you will have to appear for the interview, because the first step in adjudicating the case that the government has to make sure the marriage is real, okay? And for that, both spouses are going to have to answer questions, and they will verify eligibility. Is immigration currently working on I-751 removal of condition cases? What is the timeline you see from your experience? I cannot comment on any timelines anymore just because of the situation we're in, but absolutely they are working. I got some approvals, got some other notices from them that all the work that they can do without calling you for the interviews, they're still doing. So if you have deadlines to submit paperwork, remember to submit it. And by the way, unlike other deadlines, there was no specific exception for submission of I-751 form application to remove conditions. all right, the one that's filed jointly. The good thing is that if you are late because of the situation, because of the coronavirus, to file your application jointly, you can ask for an exception for the filing deadline. The government will consider it. My sister's husband's interview in Islamabad was cancelled due to COVID. How much longer do you think it will take? I do not know, guys. Your sister's husband interview also, it depends on which category he's in. If he's a lawful permanent resident being sponsored by a lawful permanent resident, there is those interviews right now. And if he's not, they will have to reschedule him. When they're going to reschedule him, depending on the time, he may have to update some of the documents that may expire, like medical exam and police certificates, okay? So that's very important to remember. And that's going to be it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this presentation. Please subscribe, follow me on Facebook, comment, propose new topics. I'll be very happy to help you out and answer questions to the best of my abilities in this format. I think you like it, and I hope it was helpful. Thank you.